uh, chapter 14, Brahma's prayers to Lord Krishna, and we will start today with verse number 56. But I just want to repeat, this recap of 50 to 54 and then 55, and then we can continue with 56. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnana-anjana-shalakaya Chakshur-unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshtarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we saw in the verses, after Brahma is paying his obeisance, is just about to leave, and he's already left. And Parishad Maharaj asked Sukdev Goswami a question, which is in a way related to the pastimes in Vrindavan, but the way Sukdev Goswami answers is more related to us here. So how in the scriptures, many places, in a very short time, the scriptures take us from the basic level of our material existence to the highest level of our existence in the spiritual world in Golok Vrindavan. One of them, of course, is we know chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, Purushottama Yoga, where Krishna starts explaining about the material world, and he takes us right to the spiritual world. Nectar of Instruction, another book which Prabhupada very kindly translated. Also, from the first verse, from the very basic existence of us controlling our senses, till the end, where after we understand the Upadesha Sar in the 8th verse, the essence of all the instructions that we should follow in the footsteps of Rajvasis and hear and chant the holy name of Krishna, remember Krishna 24 hours a day. And then the progression of the spiritual world also is given. So in these verses in the 10th canto, we can see that, yes, on one hand, the pastimes of Krishna, and especially the beautiful, innocent Balalila is described. But then again, Sukdev Goswami brings us back to our foundation. And he describes that how, as a soul, because we have been attached to the soul, and because of our conditioning, we are thinking that the body, we are the body, and that's why anything attached to the body, as yesterday, Gokuleshwar Prabhu gave a nice example, is that if we are sitting in a program and if we hear that a tree has fallen and has fallen on a car, someone whose car it is will be most disturbed. Others will be not as disturbed as the person whose car it is. So automatically the extension of our body is taking place there. But then in the 55th verse, Sukdev Goswami then again reminds us that we should understand that Krishna is the original soul of all the living entities. And that's why our attachment to our soul and then our body and the extensions of our body is actually an intermediate attraction. It's not a final attraction. It's not the final destination. The final destination, as we know, is for us to know that Krishna is the original soul, and we should be attached and attracted to Krishna. So as we know, some of us have heard that when we hear, and when we hear attentively Krishna Katha, so with attention comes attraction. So once we hear attentively, then we'll be attracted to Krishna, like the wives of Brahmana, Rukmini Devi. These devotees that heard about Krishna continuously, time after time, and then they got attracted to Krishna. So from attention comes attraction, and from attraction comes attachment. So when we keep on hearing like this, attachment to Krishna will automatically come. So we understand again in this verse, the verse 55, that yes, on one hand, theoretically, we understand that Krishna is the soul of all living entities, but then what does it do for us? Sukadeva Goswami says, for the benefit of the whole universe, Krishna actually appears as an ordinary human being out of his own causeless mercy. And how does he do that? By the strength of his internal potency. So we move on to text 56. Does anyone want to recite the verse and the translation, please? Anyone new who's not normally participating? That'll be appreciated. But if you're busy, then we can understand. Anyone can do it.
Vastuto janatam atra Krishnam amam sthasunu Krishnu cha Bhagavad Rupam Akhilam Nanyad Vastav Kinchana.
Thank you, Prabhu. Can you read the translation also, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Those in this world who understand Lord Krishna as he is see all things, whether stationary or moving, as manifest forms of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such enlightened persons recognize no reality apart from the Supreme Lord Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Vastutah, in fact, Janatam, for those who understand, Atra, in this world, Krishnam, Lord Krishna, Sthashnu, stationary, Charishnu, moving, Cha, and Bhagavat Rupam, the manifest forms of the personality of Godhead, Akhilam, everything, Na, nothing, Anyat, else, Vastu, substance, Iha, here, Kinchana, at all. So here when Sukadeva Goswami is saying Vastuta, it means in fact. So he is actually coming to the conclusion, the final version. This is the final version of someone who understands Krishna as he is. And then what is the result? That when we understand Lord Krishna as he is, we see in all things the Rupa of Krishna, Bhagavata Rupam, in both stationary and moving. Sthashnu and Charishnu. In previous couple of verses, Characharam word is used, Characharam. But that Characharam word is used in relation to someone who's a materialist, who doesn't know anything about Krishna. And for him, as we see, that everything is, whatever is moving or non-moving, is basically existing for my enjoyment. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that the living entity with the 5 gross and 3 subtle energies, what we are trying to do is exploit the resources of material energy for our own sense pleasure. But here, Sukadeva Goswami describes that when we see Krishna as he is, that means we understand Krishna is the all in everything. So whatever we'll see, stationary or moving, and Sukadeva Goswami describes in either ways, stationary and moving in relation to us and relation to the just general world. When we talk of in relation to us, stationary means pets, house, furniture, land, etc. But moving means in modern days it's our cars, but in olden times it was the pets and animals and cows and all that. Whereas in relation to the entire creation, we can see the stationary is like mountains, trees, like that. And moving means again animals, birds, beasts, aquatics, like that. So then when we see Krishna as he is, we will see that everything is a part and parcel of Krishna, including ourselves. And that's why our aim should be to please Krishna, to understand Krishna, to know about Krishna, and to act in such a way that gives not only pleasure to us, but gives pleasure to Krishna, because by giving pleasure to Krishna, we being part and parcel already will be satisfied and happy. Tushyanti cha, ramanti cha. So in the purport, it is said that Prabhupada translates in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Without being an expansion of Krishna, nothing can be attractive. We also know that if we understand anything which is not a part and parcel of Krishna, it will be attractive for just a moment. But beyond that, it will become stale. Whereas in Krishna consciousness, as Gokuleshwar Prabhu again explained yesterday, that same mantra, same names we've been chanting for 10, 15, 20 years, but it is ever fresh because it is attached to Krishna. So without being an expansion of Krishna, nothing can be attractive. Whatever is attractive within the cosmic manifestation is due to Krishna. So we must understand this, that whatever is attractive, and we see that in the 9th and the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he speaks about his glories, and then we can understand that whatever is attractive in the material world is due to Krishna. Krishna is therefore the reservoir of all pleasures. The active principle of everything is Krishna, and highly elevated transcendentalists see everything in connection with him. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated that the Mahabhagavat, a highly advanced devotee, sees Krishna as the active principle in all moving and non-moving living entities. Therefore, he sees everything within this cosmic manifestation in relation to Krishna. It's interesting, in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks a verse that someone who is equipoised in Krishna consciousness, he sees a pebble, stone, and gold as the same. It doesn't differentiate. Of course, in practical reality, we are not at that stage, and of course, also Prabhupada, when he explained us the term Yukta Vairagya, that means we can use everything in Krishna service, he had asked us to discriminate. But then immediately, it's easier actually, when we come to that stage, it might be easier to consider stone, pebble, and gold to be equal. But the next verse Krishna says is very important. He says, but for someone who is equipoised, a family, a friend, a mediator, a neutral person, an enemy, all these people are of the same level. So for us, if the living, if in the material world, if an inanimate object is there, it will be easier for us to accept them as same. But for our own kins, next of kin, kith and kin, mediator, negotiator, a neutral person, enemy, it will be very difficult because we are attached as extension of our false ego. So that we must understand. If you read the 6th chapter, I'll get the verses for you, where Krishna in these 2 verses, one of them is, the first one might be easier when we come to that level, but the second one is still very difficult. Any questions or comments? So let's move on to the next verse, 10, 14, 57. Anyone wants to read recite the verse, the translation, the word to word and the translation, please?
I can try, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mother, thank you.
सर्वेषामपि वस्तूनां भावार्थो भवति स्थितः तस्यापि भगवान् कृष्ण किमतद्वस्तु रूप्यताम्. Just word translation or just
word to word? Yes.
Sarvesham, of all, api, indeed, vastunam, entities, bhava artha, the original unmanifested casual face of material nature, bhavati is, sthita, established, tasya, of that unmanifest nature, api, even, Bhagwan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Lord Krishna, Kim, what, atat, separate from him, vastu, thing, Rupyatam may be ascertained. Translation: the original unmanifested form of material nature is the source of all material things, and the source of even that subtle material nature is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. What then could one ascertain to be separate from him? Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Motherji. So this, if we understand, this is again sort of a continuation of the previous verse, where Sukadeva Goswami is saying that once we understand Krishna, then we will see Krishna in everything, whether stationary or moving. And then once we come to that stage, when this enlightenment happens, then we will recognize no reality separate from Krishna. But then the question is, why is this so? And this verse answers this question, that as we know, the material nature comes from Mahatattva. Mahatattva, and Mahatattva comes from Pradhan. But Pradhan, here Krishna says that Bhavartho, and again Sukadeva Goswami says Vastunam. Vastunam, which in the previous verse we saw Vastutah. That means there's a final conclusion. This is the ultimate analysis. This is the conclusion. Sarvesham api Vastunam. That means of all indeed entities, of everything, Bhav Arthaha. Bhav Artha means the original unmanifested causal phase of material nature. What is it? It is the unmanifest. Unmanifest is the Mahatattva and Pradhana. But again, who is behind that? Tasyapi Bhagwan Krishna. So he says, even of the unmanifest nature, Krishna is the source. Bhagwan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So if we understand, then a question is asked, what then would one ascertain to be separate from him? So if we have this understanding, now to develop this understanding, the next verse, which is a very important verse, and I'm sure when tomorrow Viraj Krishna Prabhu resumes his service, he will also glorify the next verse. For us, when we want to make our journey from the material world to spiritual world, we of course know that for us hearing constantly and chanting, associating with devotees, we hear these things quite often. But many of us have this dilemma where, okay, I can do all these things in the morning, but during my working time, during my sleeping time, during the time when I'm tired, how do I connect everything to Krishna? And that's where our sadhana comes into effect. When Prabhupada used a word called dovetail, dovetail means how can we dovetail everything what we do during the day in Krishna, in the remembrance of Krishna. As we know, the goal of our life is always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. But the second part of that verse goes that whatever else we do, all the other verses, all the other mantras and shlokas and rituals are servants of these two verses. That we should always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So for us, we know that we are living in a material world which is full of lies. And as one of the Nazi propagandists, Joseph Goebbels, he said, if you speak lie long enough, it will become truth. And that's what we have been trained as. We have been, a lie, as it is said, if it is spoken by many people for a long time, it apparently becomes truth. And if the truth is practiced for a long time, which is not a truth, of course, then it becomes a culture. And when that culture is passed from one generation to another, it becomes a tradition. So we are following so many traditions we have from the childhood. But in our case, if you understand that my service is just to understand what Krishna is, what Krishna wants, and what is my goal. Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So then we translate this. And during the day, what happens is that a lot of distractions come. For example, and if we know that to avoid the distraction physically, it's easier than to avoid a mental distraction. I'll explain you how. When we are chanting our rounds, if the phone is closer to us, or if 2 or 3 people are chanting together, then there's always a tendency to look at the phone, or tendency to speak to each other for whatever service, or even though in the temple environment people say, Prabhu, I'm talking of service, but still that's a distraction in chanting. So physical, if the phone is away or if you're chanting on your own, and that's why japa is meant for our own sadhana, then physically you will find it hard to access the phone and look at the phone. But if the phone is close to you, and if you think I'm going to be strong enough to control my mind, that's going to be very difficult. So the physical control from the distraction is much easier than the mental control. So always, if you keep physical things around, if you visit a devotee unannounced in their homes, everything else will be clean. One thing will be there, that books will be lying everywhere. You know why? Because the devotees always wants to associate with Prabhupada's books. So, even if you're just going from one room to another, you're just doing things, you've got half a second, 1 minute, whatever time you have, where the devotee will open a book, read something, sometimes even while chanting in between rounds, we chant 16 rounds, every 2 or 3 rounds, devotees open up, Chaitanya Ratnamala, Bhagavad Ratnamala, Gita Ratnamala. They just go through one verse, and that verse helps them in meditating when they're chanting. So this way, when we mold our lives in such a way, Prabhupada says in 927 Bhagavad Gita, he opens the purport with, one should mold one's life in such a way that one remembers Krishna 24 hours a day. So slowly, by hearing like this, by arranging things practically at work, at home, in car, wherever, we can arrange in such a way that we always remember Krishna. Any questions or any comments? Any reflections before we move to the next verse? Okay, so we'll recite verse 58. Samashvitaye padapal-pallav-plavam mahat-padam punya-yasho murare bhavam-budhir-vatsa-padam param-padam padam-padam yad-vipadam natesham. Samashvitaye padapal-pallav-plavam mahat-padam punya-yasho murare bhavam-budhir-vatsa-padam param-padam padam padam yad vipadam natesham. This is one of the sweetest, most practical one verse rocket. Many descriptions you can give for this verse. It's such a beautiful verse, such a sweet verse. And even while just singing, your heart becomes so soft. Samashvitaye pad pallava plavam mahat padam punya yasho murare Pavambudhir vatsapadam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesha. So this verse we must all try to memorize, and I'm sure from tomorrow Viraj Krishna Prabhu will make us recite this verse again and again and again, so that within a few days, within a week, we should be able to memorize this verse. And I asked Sri Prahlada Maharaj that we remember many verses, but at times when we want to recite that verse, we forget. So what is the reason? Is that if you keep on repeating in some way or the other, then you will not forget. So this way, in the beginning, when we memorize this verse, somehow or the other, we can have a shloka buddy. We have a shloka buddy, right? A couple can be shloka buddy for each other. And you can have your friend or a young devotee, you can have a shlok buddy, recite this shlok in front of them, and you recite on your own. Samashvitaye pad pallava plavam mahat padam punya yasho murare bhavam budhir vatsa padam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesham. Samashvitaha, having taken shelter, ye, those who, pada, of the feet, pallava, like flower buds, plavam, which are a boat, mahat, of the total material creation, or of the great souls. Padam, the shelter, punya, supremely pious, yashaha, whose fame, murare, of the enemy of the demon Mura, bhava, of the material existence, ambudhihi, the ocean, vatsapadam, the hoof print of a calf, param padam, the supreme abode Vaikuntha, padam padam, at every step, yat, where, vipadam, of material miseries, Na, none, tesham, for them. Even when we are reading the word to word, we're feeling so purified. Every word of this verse is actually so deep. Just think about Samashrita having taken shelter. When you can speak about shelter, one of the 10 objects in Srīmad Bhāgavatam is Ashraya, to take shelter of the Lord, the holy name. Pada, of the feet, Pallava, like flower buds. Just imagine, lotus feet of the Lord are like flower buds. Just when you meditate upon these lotus feet, you can just not only feel purified externally, but internally also, you can get actually goosebumps externally. Plavam, which are a boat. Boat for what? To cross over the material creation. Mahat. Mahat, as we know, Mahat Tattva in the total material creation, or Mahatma of the great souls. So Mahat is something large. Padam, of the shelter. Pada is repeated again. Pada means lotus feet of the Lord, and Padam here means shelter. So shelter is repeated twice, Pada is repeated twice. Mahat, two meanings are given. Punya, supremely pious. Yasha, whose fame. Murari, the Lord's name. Bhava, of the material existence. Ambudhi, the ocean. Ocean is so deep, like our scriptures. When we dive deep into our scriptures, then the earthquakes or the life quakes or the oil spills of the top of the ocean, they do not affect us. So when we should dive deep into this ocean of these scriptures. Vatsapadam, the hoof print of a calf. The comparison is given of the pleasure of the hoof print of the water in the hoof print of a calf compared to a big ocean. Parampadam, the supreme abode Vaikuntha. Padam Padam, at every step, yet where Vipadam, of material miseries, none tesham, for them. Translation. Please hear very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. For those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is known as and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Mura demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoof print. Their goal is Parampadam Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. So in the material world, there is danger at every step, and in Vaikuntha, there is no material miseries. I'll repeat the translation again. For those who have accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the Mura demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoof print. Their goal is Parampadam Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. Such a beautiful verse. Yes, we might think it is very, very far. This destination is very far for us. We are so much conditioned. We are the lowest of the low. We are very fallen. Yes, we might think about ourselves like that. But as our acharyas say, that whether to give mercy or not is in Krishna's hands. But whether to have intense desire for pure devotional service is in our hands. So tomorrow when you get up and chant, or even today when you're chanting, even when we're not qualified, just ask Krishna, Krishna, I want nothing else. I want only your pure devotional service. So we end this class with a prayer. O Murari, O the enemy of Mura demon, please allow me to obtain pure devotional service at your lotus feet. May I remember your lotus feet, take shelter of your lotus feet at every step. I want to follow in your footsteps, in the footsteps of all the acharyas, and cross the ocean of material existence where there is padam, padam, pipadam. There is danger at every step. Grantaraj Srīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much for hearing. Please unmute yourself if you have any questions or comments or any realizations. Please share. I know I've gone 1 minute overboard, but please forgive me for that.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Mataji.
I'm not understanding this part, but the ocean of a material world is like the water contained in a calf's footprint. Can you just elaborate on that one?
So the pleasure which we get from, I'll just give you very briefly, Virat Prabhu tomorrow might enlighten you more on that because of the timing. The ocean, the pleasure in the material world, what we get is just like the amount of water in a calf's hoofprint, which is very small, compared to the ocean, compared to the pleasure we get in the devotional service here, and the pleasure we get in the spiritual world, like an ocean. So how much water is there in a calf's hoofprint, and how much water is in the ocean? So the pleasure what we get here in the material world out of anything, Prabhupada said the highest pleasure here is sex pleasure. And even in that, the pleasure we get is just like described as water in a calf's hoofprint. And when we attain devotional service, and when we attain pure devotional service, and when we attain spiritual world, the pleasure we get there in service is compared to the ocean, compared to the pleasure of material world here, which is like a calf's hoofprint. Does that make sense, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Granth-raj, Srīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta ki jai. Thank you. Have a wonderful devotional day. And just think of Krishna always and never forget Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank
Prabhu.
you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Ajus mi este.